Welcome back, everyone. I'm Nala.
And I'm Faith.
And this is the Sirens Den breakdown, theories, and things you may have overlooked for episode 5 of Wandavision.
So, this is your official spoiler warning going forward.
I'm really excited. We're getting into longer episodes now. More to take in. This episode is obviously probably it's been the best one this season.
Oh, 100%.
I love it. So, Faith, take it away. Let's break it down.
Alrighty, so the first thing that we're going to go to is the opening. Specifically, we had a previously on WandaVision, but what's notable about this previously on WandaVision is one particular scene, a notable scene that we all remember, where Vision comes in and asks where Geraldine is, and Wanda says, "Oh, she went home, honey." Wanda didn't say that during the recap. In that scene in the recap, she said, "She doesn't belong here," which I think is very notable.
Yeah, absolutely. I said that out loud. I was like, wait a minute, that isn't what she said. I'm pretty sure. Like, I'm gonna rewatch the show anyway, but I'm pretty sure she said something else. So like, why would they do it? But then, they are really not ones to shy away from like making things different, like literally changing the reality.
Yeah.
And that's what Wanda's doing. Like, she's changing our reality. She's like, nope, this is actually what I said. And there's really nothing we can say to that. So yeah, I'm glad that, other people are picking up on that.
Yeah. And I think it's also really clever that they did that in the beginning going forward, just because it really helps ease an audience into some ideas that WandaVision and Marvel is trying to bring in, that they definitely do a lot with later in the episode, and we'll get into that. But yeah, that was right first 30 seconds of the episode, and it's already given us stuff.
Yeah, we start out with the classic sitcom house. Wanda is trying to put one of the twins to sleep and is having a hard time. And then Vision comes down with the other one and is also struggling to put them to sleep.
Can we just appreciate that set was just a knockoff of the Full House living room?
And her costume absolutely just reminded me of her sisters and how they looked.
And also when so later on, they're freaking out about this, and Agnes comes in dressed as Kimmy Gibbler, which was phenomenal, really. From Full House, Kimmy Gibbler from Full House. The Full House being the sitcom that Elizabeth Olsen's older sisters, Mary Kate and Ashley Olsen, got their start as wee little babies.
Adorable. This was a really nice way to kind of get us into the suspense of what drives most of this episode.
Yeah, because it kind of goes from the sitcom moment of kooky Agnes is here to help babysit them, and Vision is a little bit reluctant because he's a new dad. He doesn't want to just give his kids to anyone, but this throws Agnes off, and this is when she like breaks character, and she looks to Wanda and she goes, "Do you want me to take it again from the top?" Like straight up just fourth wall breaking, acknowledging that this is a sitcom that they are playing out, and the scene was ruined. And because previously when scenes had been ruined, Wanda took it away from the top, or took it from the top. So it was just Agnes kind of playing into that idea, which again just screams to me that she isn't who she says she is. I know we say that every episode, but just that was so spooky, right?
Oh yeah, it really, that part was really uneasy because the laugh track was still there, but it was kind of the thing where you're like, oh, this is really, really uneasy. I don't know what's going on. And to me, it felt like Agnes was telling Wanda, when she tells Wanda, "Do you want me to take it from the top? You want me to hold the kids." It was almost like she was not looking at Vision at all. She was like telling Wanda, "This is what you want me to do," kind of like hypnotizing her almost. Kind of showing that maybe she obviously knows what's going on, and she knows how she can kind of control Wanda. Which is maybe, her doing some witchy powers if she does end up being Agatha Harkness.
Yeah, just I think it kind of going off of when on our episode 4, you had the theory that Agnes was the stork in the room, or at the very least had control of the stork in the room.
Mhm.
In this, so far, there have been 2 things that Wanda has not been able to just control with the snap of her fingers: the stork and the kids. So
Mhm.
it really makes me think that maybe the kids might be a manifestation of her power, a little bit mixed in with Wanda's.
She was very involved in this episode with the kids specifically, and yeah, maybe it could be an amalgamation of both their powers.
Yeah. Anyways, it goes back to normal sitcom mode. Catherine Hahn is hilarious the whole time. But then when Wanda and Vision are having a conversation, that was a little bit of a weird moment back there, wasn't it? Wanda's like, no, I don't know what you're talking about. That was perfectly normal. But they realized the kids have stopped crying because, surprise, surprise, they're 5-year-olds now.
And Agnes does not blink an eye.
Mm-hmm. She
She, in
could care
fact,
less.
yeah, she mentions that kids, you can't control them, which is literally Wanda can't control them,
Mm-hmm.
which, just points to her knowing more than she lets on.
So after that, we have our opening. Our opening, it was one of the longer openings. It's also probably not my favorite opening that we've gotten, but it's definitely up there. It is this cheesy 80s sitcom opening. It's mainly pulling off of Family Matters and Full House. We got to see pictures of baby Wanda, which are probably just pictures of young Elizabeth Olsen, but we also got to see pictures of just baby Vision, which was, I wonder if those were actual pictures of Paul Bettany as a kid that they just like photoshopped to look like Vision.
I think they might have been. I think the show was Family Ties.
Oh,
And
yeah.
yeah, and then Growing Pains with the pictures, and then Full House. And I did love seeing baby Elizabeth Olsen, but also a teenage Elizabeth Olsen, and you realize she's in a picture with, I mean, what seems to be Sokovia, but you
Mm-hmm.
don't see her brother there. But baby Vision was adorable because that didn't exist.
Yeah.
None of this exists. This is all just made up on the fly, which I think is funny and also just sad,
Mm-hmm.
because it really shows the lengths that Wanda is willing to go to just have a little moment of happiness.
Honestly. Although I do wonder, this episode is starting to get me to wonder, at least, and I've been wondering this for a while because we know that the commercials, the openings, everything that we're seeing as an audience is something that an episode that the Sword headquarters was able to watch. But
Mhm.
I'm really wondering, if Wanda is the one that's controlling the edits. And kind of further than that, I wonder if she's the one controlling the commercials and the openings. Like,
Mhm.
while Wanda is in this kind of sitcom reality, I don't know if she's necessarily the one making the broadcast, if that makes sense.
I definitely, yeah, I agree because there are signs pointing to Wanda not being fully in control of everything that's happening. There is stuff that she doesn't plan on. And maybe there are like other forces at work here just really playing off of Wanda's massive grief that she's feeling.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We then kind of cut to the sword base. Monica is doing medical tests because of course she is. She just went through heck of a lot. But meanwhile, she's kind of recapping what she experienced in the hex, as they're starting to call it, which is so clever. But she remembers that she felt a lot of pain, that she felt Wanda in her head, that all she felt was just pure grief,
Mhm.
which is spooky. And she talks to Darcy and Jimmy Woo, who tell her that they have a briefing in a little bit. Meanwhile, the medical person comes back and is like, we gotta do these tests again. There's no results.
Dun dun dun, which is obviously just keeps pointing to the fact that she probably has superpowers now. Like her
Mhm.
DNA has been rearranged. Obviously,
100%.
it's this is like the second time it's been rearranged. She got dusted back, and now she got blasted through like all this like energy, this hex, so to speak. So
Mhm.
she definitely has a lot of radiation to her name.
Yeah. And something I also thought was really notable about this scene when they're going the recap of what Monica experienced in the hex and how she's talking about how all she felt was Wanda's extreme grief. They cut through multiple like things. It was a lot of flash or fast cuts, but they cut to her from the hospital to the to being blasted out of the hex to when she was undusted and that whole moment and she found out that her mom was dead, which she I think that's why in the first episode, that first scene we get was Monica experienced the grief of losing her mom. And I think the reason that they showed us that at the first episode is I think that was part of what Monica was experiencing. I think that the grief that Wanda is causing isn't necessarily it's her own grief of the loss of her loved ones, but I think it's bringing out that grief and those memories because later on we'll get to it. Norm has a similar moment.
Definitely. I think Wanda is maybe amplifying, her victim, so to speak, is amplifying that sense of grief, because multiple people talk about how excruciating it was, not necessarily the physical pain, but maybe like the emotional pain.
Mhm.
It's just being trapped in this state of grief, which is essentially what Wanda is. She is also trapped in this place with the corpse of Vision, as we saw in the last episode.
So they then go to the meeting, and Jimmy Woo and Tyler Hayward give a breakdown of what they now know. Tyler Hayward is just like a douche canoe the whole time.
Mhm.
Um, I hate him very deeply. I get why he's here. I think he'll contribute to the story, but I hate him. The fact that he went out of his way to humiliate Jimmy, and then again he went out of his way to humiliate Monica because Monica brings up that she doesn't think that Wanda is doing this like for a political reason or to express harm. And then Tyler's like, oh, yeah? Well, here is this video that I just got the authorization to share from 9 days ago of Wanda stealing Vision's body from the Sword headquarters. And then he's like, and it was against his living wishes because he didn't want to be used as a weapon. And it's just like, bro, why was he at Sword then?
I like that they brought in the whole scene at Sword because we've been hearing this talk about the end credit scene to Avengers Endgame, so we're getting some of that now. We're getting some more backstory. We're seeing Wanda before this whole WandaVision thing happened, so like we're seeing her at her lowest point, and she just blew the doors off, just crushed all the security cameras, just like wrecked the place. She was mad. And
Mhm.
it's probably like, yeah, I'm not the biggest fan of Hayward. I know he has reason. Like, she does have an entire town held hostage, put under a hex. Haha. But she was obviously she's reacting to all of this because she's in grief. And she probably knew that Vision's living will didn't want him to be used as a weapon, so that's probably why she stole him in the first place. And
Mhm.
now Hayward's trying to spin it like Wanda did it for her own malicious intent when Wanda would
Yeah.
never ever use Vision as a weapon.
I think you're right, and I think there's a moment great later in the episode that kind of that goes along with that. So we cut back to World and Wonderland, and we see the two now 5-year-old kids um, washing a mysterious thing in the tub, and they're like, "Oh, we got to get it clean, so Mom will let us keep it." Wanda walks in and is like, "What are you doing with that?" And it's revealed it's a dog. Wanda's like, "You guys can't have a dog," and Ned starts to fall in love with the dog. Vision comes into the scene. Wanda asks why he's dressed so nice, and Vision says, "I have a feeling someone might stop." And then Agnes drops in a nice Kimmy Gibbler moment with a doghouse, and Vision says bye with exactly the item we need. Once again, kind of going into this Vision is starting to figure out the Truman Show nature of his life. And he's becoming more and more suspicious of it as the minutes go by.
I like that, again, Vision is starting to notice the discrepancies. He's starting to notice the coincidences. And he starts to notice that Wanda's acting a little bit lax with disguising her powers, because she just creates a dog collar in front of Agnes. And it is true, Agnes was not actually looking at her while she did it. But still, you know, Agnes comes back up and suddenly she has a dog collar with the exact name. Obviously, it's like, where could that have like been conjured up from? Oh, which leads to Vision and Wanda having their first big fight.
Yeah, it's like the walls are starting to crumble in this picture perfect suburban relationship. And then the kids are like, please, can we keep the dog? And Wanda is like, no, you can't until you're kind of going back into the sitcom roles. And Vision's like 10. And then Wanda's like 10. And then the 5-year-olds look at each other like they got an idea of some kind. And everyone's like, oh, no, 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 no. They turn 10. They turn into 8. They turn into 10-year-olds in front of Agnes, who again doesn't care, in front of the parents. These kids are rapidly accelerating and kind of once again proving that Wanda doesn't have control of them. She told them that these are the conditions of being able to own this pet, and they're like, okay, this might be a hint for if they are real, or they do become real eventually in the comics. Kind of building up to what is going to be Young Avengers,
which is really exciting. Yeah, with obviously all the other slates in Disney's roster, that's definitely what they're going to be building up to. Just a new, younger version of them Avengers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we have Monica, Darcy, and Jimmy. We cut back to them, and it's mostly exposition. Wanda, or not Wanda, Monica is theorizing a device that might be able to break through the hex safely and get her back inside. She mentions an aerospace engineering friend who might be able to help make this happen. Who I personally think that aerospace engineer might be, I think it might be Reed Richards. We know that they've kind of hinted at the Fantastic Four a little bit earlier in the series, like just kind of some throwaway lines. And as we know from this show, we'll get to it, the show isn't afraid to do anything.
Yeah, I mean, they're gonna bring them in anyway. These movies have been confirmed. Might as well get them in early. And with these little Easter eggs, I think that's where they're going.
Also, a notable exposition moment in this is they kind of talk about they're talking about the kids. They can't identify who these kids are, and Monica's like, "Well, of course you can't. They're actually Wanda's kids." And Darcy and Jimmy are like, "What? That she has to be like seriously hella powerful to be able to do that." And or Monica is like, "Yeah, she would have taken out Thanos if he didn't call in a blitz from a galactic space army," which is true. And Jimmy Woo counters, "I don't know, Captain Marvel almost got her down." And then Monica reacts weird to that, which is interesting because Monica was introduced in the Captain Marvel movies as a kid. Captain Marvel was a close friend of her mom.
Yeah, and not only that, she seemed pretty close with her. I mean, we saw in the episode before, she's being called Lieutenant Trouble by her. That's a callback to her childhood. That was obviously something poignant. They wouldn't have had clips from Captain Marvel, and they wouldn't have had her be name dropped and Monica react so strongly to that if something didn't happen. So it could be a lot of things. It could be the fact that we didn't see Captain Marvel from her film in the 90s until basically Endgame, or Infinity War, at the end of Infinity War. And Endgame is when we saw her, she came back. So maybe Monica is upset that she hasn't seen her in a long time. Then suddenly she just comes back for a second and then leaves again. Like, I think that's definitely like she probably felt abandoned, and now that her mom is no longer here either, she doesn't know how else to feel? She's not going to be like, oh, yes, this person that I haven't seen for a majority of my life, I'm supposed to
Mhm.
care about them.
Alternatively, it might just be something that we get in Captain Marvel 2. That might just be maybe there is some unnamed event that we don't know of that happened in the meantime that we are going to maybe see more of as we build up to the second Captain Marvel movie.
There's a lot of there's I'm excited to see more of the bad blood between them, especially as it goes into something that could potentially be a point of conflict in the second Captain Marvel movie.
For sure, for sure.
I like this the next part where Monica suddenly has an idea and goes to find her old uniform, quote unquote. And they take her to the place where you see her little 70s get up with the fish pants and like the really cool almost pirate vest jacket blouse. And I like this scene a lot because then she shoots at it and you're like, what is going on? Like, what is she getting at?
Mm-hmm.
And they eventually just come to the conclusion that she's like, Wanda isn't making these things appear. These are this is her actual uniform that Wanda has now warped. So her pants and her blouse that just look like really thin material is actually Kevlar.
Yeah.
So it's just like she's transforming it into something new, but the base molecules and materials are still there.
And it just kind of proves the point of how strong Wanda is. And Monica has the idea that, oh, well, if she's changing things as they go into this reality, maybe we just put something in that doesn't need to be changed.
Mm-hmm.
So they get a drone from the 80s. But before that, we cut back to Vision Network they're installing new computers at work. Norm is being Norm, just kind of the goofy sitcom sidekick.
Mhm.
There's your tongue twister. Sitcom sidekick. But they're setting up the computer, and after some witty banter, Norm's like, "Oh, we got our first email," and he says it exactly like that. You can quote me on that. But so they open the email, and it is Darcy's report on the radiation of the hex, and everyone in the room starts reading it in monotone, and it's creepy as hell.
Mhm. And so he like shuts the computer down.
Mhm.
And then just like has kind of this like epiphany and just takes that power and goes to Norm. And it's basically the same thing that he did with Ultron, like rewriting code, so to speak. He's kind of like rewiring Norm's brain. And this part was so good. I really commend the actor because he did
Mhm.
such a good job. Being broken from the trance and just going into a complete panic over his family and his sister and his dad and how he needs to get a phone. But obviously, they're in the 80s. He doesn't know what's going on. And he's telling Vision that he needs to stop her because it's so painful. He doesn't mention who he needs to stop. So that's something that is worth noting. He just says you need to stop her. There have been several hers in this show. And Vision automatically thinks it's Wanda because he knows something's not right and Wanda isn't telling him everything. But it could also be someone else. We do not know. Mhm.
Something else here is here's another example of a character. The first thing he thinks of is his sister who is taking care of their incredibly sick father. So once again, we have a character who is about not hasn't experienced a great loss, but is on the verge of experiencing one. And
Mm.
when you're on that verge, there's still that grief there. Kind of again going off of I think that Wanda's thing is not necessarily giving people her own personal grief. Like I don't think everyone in there is like, oh God, Pietro. Like I think Wanda's grief that she's causing is causing them to relive the grief in their life, especially because this is 3 weeks out from the blip, 2 weeks when this would have when it would have happened. So here are all these characters who 2 weeks ago everyone who disappeared from their life suddenly came back, and some of these characters probably did come back when this happened. Like there's a really good chance that half this town they got blipped back into existence, found out that how much the world has changed, and now they're stuck here. And this is getting in a
Ooh.
little bit of a tangent, but I think it's not necessarily only Amanda's emotions that are being played off of here. I think it's everybody's.
I definitely that would definitely explain as to why it's so powerful.
Mm-hmm.
Like, everything is just being amplified and huh, I like that theory. I mean, they have that tendency because they have, like, when they were, like, for the children in unison, and when they all spoke in the same time reading that email, it's like there is something greater that they could be contributing to this.
Mm-hmm. So we cut back to Wonderland. The kids are teaching the dog a new trick. They're successful. They're like, we gotta show Dad, and Wanda's like, Dad's at work, so you can't. And the kids are like, it's Saturday. Why is Dad at work? And Wanda has to explain that sometimes like parents don't always get along, guys. The name of the episode is a very special episode. As we know, a lot of sitcoms have this trend of doing very special episodes where they talk about serious topics, which this one kind of falls into that theme a little bit. Oh,
She talks about how, Billy and Tommy can get into fights too, but he'll always be his brother, and so will he. So that prompts them to ask Wanda if she has a brother, to which she replies, yes. We get more of that asking about Pietro again. And she mentions that she does. He lives far away, and that makes her sad. So maybe this could also be Wanda dealing with her grief in a way. And that's also just causing more problems. And it's also just a plant for the end of the episode, which we'll get to obviously. But for now, she misses Pietro, and he's far away, and there's nothing she can do about it. Or can she?
mm-hmm.
Because then Sparky goes outside and starts barking. And that is how he is able to get out and run away. But that prompts Wanda and the boys to go out and investigate when they see the drone.
Mm-hmm. It's this drone from the 80s. Monica's piloting it. She tries to contact Wanda through the drone. We cut back to the Sword headquarters. They're looking at the footage. They see that the drone isn't showing up in the broadcast, meaning that it's being edited out of there. And in the drone footage of what they're seeing with the drone, they see Wanda's eyes start to turn red. And then Tyler, being a tool, is like, take the shot. And Monica's like, what? This drone isn't armed. And then our drone is armed. And she's like, why would you do that? Why would you shoot a missile at a nuclear woman?
Oof. I love that her eyes glow red in black and white
Mhm.
footage.
And yeah, I think we were all like, no. And then things start going haywire. We see Hayward because of Haywire because of Hayward. But we see that then everything at the Sword headquarters, or not the headquarters, the base of operations outside the hex is starting to go bananas because they're like, something is breaching. So they go to see what's breaching, and we see a figure pop out of the breach, and it's Wanda, and she's mad, and she's
Ooh.
carrying the drone in her hand and just yeets it at them.
And she is dressed like she was in Endgame and Infinity War, and her accent is back.
Mm-hmm. And this has been another notable moment is Tyler's like, sorry I shot at you, but can you blame me? And Wanda's like, I'm not the one with the guns. And I think that this is a notable line because Wanda is showing specific aggression towards Sword. She's shown specific aggression towards Sword since episode 2. She has a town hostage. So, like, at first I was like, the gun line, that's a little bit weird, but it's towards him. And it makes me wonder, what was he doing to Vision?
Mm-hmm.
Like that line, I'm not the one with the guns, has to mean something else.
Absolutely. I think when you look back at that footage, Vision was not a whole corpse. He was dismembered. Like, they were obviously doing stuff, and this was, they didn't have Monica to tell them no. They didn't have Mariah to tell them no. They were basically operating completely uninhibited. And maybe Wanda finding out that information could have also just made her snap even more, because she was fine at first, probably letting Vision go because he asked her to.
Mhm.
That's like those were like his last words, and she was okay with that, and she had that moment of peace.
Mhm. Monica kind of steps in, thank God, and is like, "Hey, like, let's be chill here." And it's kind of appealing to Monica, like Wanda, of like, "Hey, you're this telepathic mind reader. Like, on some level, you had to know I was Sword, and on some level, you still trusted me to deliver your kids. You have to know that I am an ally and I am here to help you."
Mhm.
Meanwhile, Wanda is like, "Well, how can you help me? Like, what can you offer me? Like, you can't give me anything." And Monica's like, "Yes, I can. What do you want?" And Wanda's like, "I already have everything I want." She warns everybody not to touch her home again. This is their last warning. And then all the snipers that are turned on her, she does some mind control stuff, and they all turn on Tyler. And I was like, yes.
I love that callback to, or the reference to Magneto, with the guns.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that was really cool. And I also like how she talked about she has everything she needs and no one will ever take it from her again.
Tyler specifically is kind of the implication of that scene.
No, so it was a really cool scene, and she goes back into her reality, and now instead of it being this like iridescent see-through kind of field, it's now red. Like everyone can see it now. She says she's also not hiding anymore. It's also fun to note that when this was happening, all of the TV screens were saying, please stand by, like the broadcast had been interrupted. And then suddenly Wanda walks out of this reality that she was projecting.
And then she goes back into the hex, and everything starts to turn red inside it. Which
Mhm.
what does that mean? I don't know. But speaking of red, something that I thought was really kind of cool, that I think it was New Rockstars that pointed it out, that everything in the WandaVision world has a red tint to it, almost like someone took the red contrast in the footage and just bumped it way the heck up.
Mhm.
And once that was pointed out, like really going back and watching that episode, you really see that. It's such a cool, eerie little detail, and it's hard not to see once it's pointed out to you.
I really appreciate the meticulous planning that goes into it. Seems like goes into every part of this show.
I will fight anyone who is in the Marvel is it the cinema camp, because just as much thought and effort and love is going into these movies as your favorite indie film. Like, shut up.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm
Um,
with you.
like, it's such a discredit to everyone who's working so hard to make these so beautiful and so just well thought out and just detail driven.
Mhm.
That it's if you are truly a cinema fan, you wouldn't say dumb things like that. We then have our commercial break. They're back. And this week's break is about the paper towel brand Lagos. And it
Aha.
depicts the same family that we'd been seeing. And so something I am wondering, because I think it's the same two kids that we saw in the last commercial.
Mhm. These commercials are now specifically just targeting
Mm-hmm.
traumatic events in Wanda's life. And with Lagos, this one was a really kind of messed up commercial with the red juice and
Mm-hmm.
like having all that blood in on your hands, and their slogan of, when you need to clean up, or like when you make a mess that you didn't mean to. And you're like,
This is
that's exactly what happened. That's wow.
Yeah. So Lagos, from those of you guys who don't know, it was it a city that just Wanda wrecked in Civil
Mhm.
War. At the beginning of Civil War, they were in a fight. It's what led to the Sokovia Accords, was how she unleashed her powers there. It was a really bad accident. She did not mean for that to happen. She was devastated by it. But also, this kind of goes back to how I think that it's something else that is editing the episodes, and it's something else that is causing the commercial breaks, because it's what you said, Nala. It's that these commercial breaks, this one seemed particularly almost cruel. Like it was taunting of her. Like the other,
Mhm.
it was very antagonistic towards Wanda specifically. So we cut to Wanda. She's back with the kids like nothing ever happened, looking for the dog who mysteriously disappeared after a missile shot out at them. They pass a mailman who is like, "Don't worry, your mom won't let that dog get too far," which was such a creepy little throwaway line. And then they get to Agnes in her rose bushes, where unfortunately the dog ate too many of the azalea leaves and he died. The kids are very devastated. They're like, "Make him come back, mom." And Agnes is like, "You can do that?"
Mhm.
Um, and Wanda's like, and this is also something I find really interesting because Wanda in here is really pushing back on the idea that she can bring back anyone to life. It is they go back to the family is forever, mom.
So with Agnes being really excited that Wanda could bring people back from the dead, could just keep feeding into our theory of really everyone in this town is dealing with grief. Um, in the fact that Ralph, we never see him because he might be dead.
Yeah.
And she might be looking for someone to bring him back. But it seemed like Agnes wants to use Wanda's reanimation abilities for her own nefarious purposes.
Yeah, I think you might be onto something there. I because you're right, she did have this super like you can do that like surprised moment when
Mhm.
um she had it, which it was different from all of her other kind of wink wink nudge nudge moments. It actually there's something a little bit more real to it than everything else that we've been seeing. I wonder because if she's so sure that she can't bring anyone back to life, she's very clear with them that this is something that she can do. Even though that this grief is what is clearly driving her throughout the show, she isn't she isn't giving into that. She's not like, "Oh, yeah, of course I'll bring your dog back. Of course I can bring back." But which makes me wonder, what about Vision? Um,
And I think it's also cool when they talk about bringing people back from the dead, and then suddenly Vision shows up right
mhm.
on cue. Wanda tells the kids not to age themselves up because they need to deal with the pain that they're feeling, and it seems like Wanda should just start taking her own advice.
It's really kind of what she kind of accepted and was moving on with at the end of Endgame.
Mhm. Also, thinking about the fact that her children are the same age that she was when she lost her parents, she just wants to give them a happy life, the life that
Yeah.
she didn't have.
Mhm. So anyway, we cut back to later that night, and Wanda and Vision are talking. Uh, Vision's like, "How are the kids?" Wanda's like, "Oh, pretty devastated because her dog died." And kind of makes this kind of quip, kind of dismissing it almost like, "Oh, life moves fast in the suburbs." After Vision says it's not often that you get a dog and he dies in the same day. And that's when Vision starts to confront Wanda over things. He starts to confront Wanda over the conversation that he had with Norm, and he starts to confront Wanda about everything that he's suspecting about his Truman Show life. And while they start to have this argument, the credits start to roll.
I like this part because he says, "You can't control me like you do them," and she says, "Can't I?" And then he bows his head down, and you think, "Uh-oh." And then, the credits start to roll, but he pushes past that. And this was so cool because usually when credits roll, everything calms down and it just cuts to music. You don't really hear their dialogue because it gets interrupted by the music and you can't focus with the credits, but they are arguing and it is getting very heated, and as soon as it leaves the room, the credits are gone too. Like her concentration is broken. And then it just escalates more in the room, and it's no longer the sitcom. It's kind of like what happens after as they start floating and look like they're about to attack each other.
Mhm. And they have this, like, really emotional moment after that where, Vision is kind of, like, appealing to her that he's scared. He can't remember who he is before any of this, that this is all the life he knows, and he wants to know more than that, and Wanda is like, "You don't wanna know." And there's just another reason why I think that Sword was doing something to Vision because she I don't think it's necessarily, if she's doing this, not necessarily to resurrect Vision, but to protect him from Tyler. Why can't he go out there? Why doesn't he want to know? Is the reason that like he can't remember anything is because she's trying not to make him relieve just the horrible things that were happening to him.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I wonder if this picturesque, beautiful sitcom life isn't necessarily, it's Wanda reacting to her grief, but is it more so Wanda protecting her loved ones and protecting them from a greater threat?
I can definitely see that. It could just it ties into more of this mystery of like who is really pulling the strings, because she admits that she doesn't know how this whole thing started. It seems like this wasn't what she intended to do. It seems like something just got out of her control, and now she doesn't know how to stop it. And he tells her that even though she doesn't know how it all started, she knows now what's going on, and he's basically giving her a chance to try to fix what's happening.
He
And
also brings up that there are no kids in Westview.
she says
Which,
there are, but there aren't.
yeah. Shout out again to both Elizabeth Olsen and Paul Bettany. They killed it this episode. They've been killing it every episode. Again, if there's no like acting awards for any of this, it'll be a crime.
She is killing it. She has to play so many characters. You know, she was actually Wanda Maximoff in the present day when she crossed the barrier. And then she has to be this 80s housewife. And then she has to be also this grief-stricken woman who has lost basically everything in her life. And it's just like she is doing a beautiful job balancing and juggling all of it. But I like this moment where they're like maybe having a breakthrough and something is starting to happen, and maybe she's starting to realize that maybe she is wrong and could potentially start breaking down the barrier, when suddenly the doorbell rings. And Vision sees it as like her avoiding the subject by creating a distraction. But she mentions that it's not her doing it. And while she thinks Vision doesn't believe her, she says it again, it's not her doing it. And I think that's a really poignant like detail, because then when we open the door, we find
It is revealed to be Quicksilver, but not the MCU Quicksilver that has been established. It is the other cinematic universe within the Marvel universe, the X-Men universe, the Fox X-Men universe that Disney bought. That Quicksilver.
oh snap, she recast Pietro. I'm
Yeah.
very intrigued to see, you know, obviously where this goes next. This is such an awesome reveal for a lot of reasons. One,
Mm-hmm.
obviously Evan Peters is the superior Quicksilver, but also because she is just as shocked. This wasn't someone she conjured up. So with Darcy saying she recast Pietro, maybe she didn't. There's something about this that is just like a little too weird. Like, I don't think Evan Peters is actually Quicksilver.
Well, the thing that's weird to me about it, because on one hand, I think this is Agnes or something. This is whatever outside power is involved in this, trying to keep Wanda from stopping it all. But she recognized him, despite the fact it was a totally different person, a different face, a different accent.
Mm-hmm.
But Wanda still recognized him, almost not immediately, but pretty quickly. Which I don't think she would have done if there was something Pietro-esque about him, enough for her to recognize in her soul that this was her brother.
Mm-hmm. I think it's kind of like his mannerisms, because he was pretty sassy
Mm-hmm.
in the one Age of Ultron film we did get him in.
I genuinely no idea if this is I go back and forth on if it's a manifestation from an evil doer or if he just got pulled out from the multiverse, and that's about to happen a lot more.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm with you on both theories. It could be someone playing off of, because I mean, Wanda mentions a brother. It mentions how sad she is. She can't see him, and then suddenly he shows up, like out of nowhere. And it seems like Agnes is always there with something that they need when they need it.
Yeah.
Maybe she could be behind it, or it could be this whole thing has gotten so out of hand when she upped the radiation on this hex. Maybe it could have opened up, because in Guardians 2, when they were traveling through different universes and galaxies, they would go through hexagonal shapes. And maybe that could be a gateway. And maybe that could be the gateway from one universe to the other.
So I wonder if we're gonna be seeing two different Pietros. I wonder if we're gonna be seeing our Marvel Pietro and our X-Men Pietro in the same episode. Just because I just how they explain how this happened, if this is a manifestation or if this is the real Pietro from another universe. Especially because we are starting to go back into Wanda's backstory and we are starting to really kind of explore those elements. It would make sense that we see Pietro, but also if they pulled Evan Peters into because again, the beginning of the episode, we see Wanda say something completely different in the recap versus what she actually said in the show. In this, we now have a totally different Pietro that she still recognizes as her brother. The episode is really, really introducing the Marvel audience to the idea of multiple different realities, like a multiverse of some kind. Whoa.
I'll also point out that it could be, if we're still going with like the stork theory and Agnes being the stork and being able to transform, this could also be Agnes, maybe in disguise. Because again, she always shows up either ringing the doorbell or from the back door and always interrupts some moment. It could be her. It could be her maybe trying to win Wanda over again, because Wanda's starting to maybe realize that what she's doing is wrong and is maybe could be persuaded to stop what she's doing, but Agnes is trying to make her stay.
So I really wonder if this is going to be how Marvel brings the X-Men universe and marries it to the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
I'm super stoked to see what the implications of X-Men being introduced in the MCU are going to be. I'm so excited to see more of Evan Peters as potentially Quicksilver. He's playing that cool Uncle Jesse character that we're definitely going to see in the 90s episode. And to go off of that, next episode is going to be the Halloween episode. Obviously, kids like to trick or treat a lot. So I'm intrigued to see how they bring up the kids and the lack thereof next time. I love me a good Halloween episode. I love that they're bringing back the original costumes. It would be amazing if the kids also dressed up as the comic book versions of Wiccan and Speed, because then we could get a full comic book accurate version of that family. And isn't that all we want? Like, we love these modern renditions, obviously, but every once in a while we want to take it back to the OG.
Yeah, I just need that a really good thing like that to sob over.
But I'm really excited to see what it brings, what next week brings.
I'm really excited to see what happens next.
Well, we'll find out next week, and you can tune in as we continue our trek through this wonderful series. It's getting so good.
Tell us what you thought of episode 5 in the comments, or send us an email at sirensdenpodcast@gmail.com.
Thank you to Tyra, producer, and Sean Thomas at buzzstudio.com for our theme song.
We'll catch you next time.
Bye.
Bye.